Orbiting a weapon is not merely a threat of military proportions. It's a hazard to the surging space economy that has billions of dollars at stake. As the Russian-Ukrainian conflict marks 2 years, US intelligence agencies raise concerns about Russia potentially pointing a nuclear weapon at an unconventional target. Not a location on Earth, but the satellites circulating in space. The act of orbiting a weapon is not merely a military threat, but also endangering the economies both in space and here on Earth. There's a burgeoning, yet relatively unknown segment that ensures satellites. However, it does not offer coverage against nuclear weapons. The repercussions could be astronomical, possibly running into hundreds of billions or even trillions, considering the services dependent on these satellites. David Wade, an underwriter from Atrium Space Insurance Consortium, which provides satellite insurance for Lloyds, states this. However, this risk isn't covered by insurance. As Wade points out in an email, in a typical space insurance policy, there are exclusions for war acts, anti-satellite devices, and nuclear reaction or radiation or radioactive contamination, except for radiation naturally found in the space environment. The US space model heavily leans on commercialization, as Russell Sawyer, a space insurance broker at Lockton in London, observes. He mentions that the government has delegated risk to private firms, and if the nuclear threat becomes a reality, this trend could be reversed and governmental intervention would be requisite. Efrat Livni. Of more than 8,000 satellites in orbit, thousands belong to private companies, according to Orbiting Now, a site that compiles real-time satellite tracking data from NASA and other sources. The Russian weapon is said to be designed to target satellites in low Earth orbit, where most commercial satellites operate. SpaceX's Starlink dominates the space-based internet services industry, and Amazon also has big aspirations in space. But the sharp drop in launch costs in recent years, driven largely by SpaceX, has made entry possible for many smaller players, leading to a satellite business frenzy that prompted the Federal Communications Commission to open a space bureau last year. Wade estimated the total value of all insured satellites in orbit at $25 billion. That doesn't include the revenue they generate. The Satellite Industry Association estimated revenues for non-governmental satellite services at $113 billion in 2022. Investment in the space economy is increasing quickly. Space activity could total $620 billion this year, according to the most recently available estimate. That's up from $545 billion in 2022, according to an estimate from the Space Foundation, a non-profit that promotes space education and enterprise. Aspirations for the space economy include mining for rare minerals and water, tourism, communications, and data transfer infrastructure. On Thursday, a lunar lander from Intuitive Machines, traveling on a SpaceX rocket, became the first private craft to land on the moon, which some are hopeful leads to mining for water that could be used to make fuel for more distant industrial missions. A space weapon would cast a pall across other businesses, too. Industries from agriculture to tech depend on satellites, and sectors like shipping, transport, banking, and supply chain management rely on GPS, which uses satellites. The threat would also have a depressive effect on space company valuations broadly, said Donald Moore, CEO of the Space Finance Corporation and a space policy lecturer at the University of Michigan Law School. The new threat could also put a dent in the US government's plans to rely on private players, just as the Department of Defense is expected to release details of a new strategy to integrate commercial satellites in national security, noted Brian Whedon, the Chief Program Officer for the Secure World Foundation, a non-profit that works on space policy. As we delve deeper, some experts remain skeptical about the projected risk. The exact ramifications would largely depend on several unknown variables, such as the weapon's specifics, the contingency plans of companies, and other dynamic factors. We could still communicate, assures Henry Hertzfeld, a space policy professor at George Washington University and a former chief economist at NASA. We still have some landlines, he quips, speaking from his office phone. Furthermore, he questions whether Russia would indeed unleash this threat, given the potential hazards it would pose to its own space activities. It's worth noting that such an action would also contradict an international space treaty. In this complex chess game of space economy, every move has far-reaching implications, and the outcomes are as vast as space itself.